Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Cerberus. I am one of your hosts, Feminist. I'm joined by my co-hosts, Mr. Timothy Knight and Andre Milosh. Timothy, tell us how you're doing.
Today's a good day. It's gray outside, but I've been busy getting Substack primed up and very active, so I'm excited to find something new to squirrel on.
Glad to hear it. And Andre, how are you?
I'm fine. I'm very happy to be here and to have this discussion, both of you. I think it will be a very sensitive subject, but it is interesting. So I'm very anxious to talk about it.
And as usual, I'm doing good too. I look forward to these Cerberus episodes. Today, we're going to have a bit of a more serious episode. We're going to talk about some taboo subjects, the sort of surrounding the civilizational decline of Canada, with things like the effects of feminism on the breakup of the family unit, abortion, tangential things like MAID, and transgenderism as well. And the reason that we chose this topic is that Mr. Knight dusted off a speech he wrote a long time ago when he was very young, back in high school. And I believe he's not going to read it verbatim here, but it's so long ago. It was printed in a newspaper. There was no internet back then. Tim, why don't you get things started? Tell us a little bit about this letter, as much as you're comfortable with, and then we can go into your Substack article.
I was raised in the 70s and 80s in a small town in Newfoundland. Good Irish DNA kid in Newfoundland, devout Catholic. That meant that I attended Catholic schools. I went to Catholic Mass. I was an altar boy. I sang in the choir. I was in Boy Scouts. Back then, even civic organizations were very attached to their churches and whatnot. And one of the effects of that is my grade 11 English teacher, Brother Slattery, had taught us a lot about Shakespeare. We did like three works of Shakespeare. We did Orwell. We did a variety of these things. And then toward the end of that year, had each of us do a report. He said, I want to take what you've learned and turn this into a report. You pick the topic. And so it was 1984, and I wanted something, provocative. And abortion was very much a discussion in 1984 nationwide, largely led by Morgenthaler's fight with the federal government and whatnot. So I wrote this speech for English class, and I got a B on it because it wasn't very good. But the school debate team coach was also a teacher, and he had heard about this. He said, well, Brother Slattery says it's pretty good. If we were to tidy up and make it speech ready, would you be interested in using it in some of the civic public speaking competitions that we participate in? So like the Lions Club, the Rotary, and other similar organizations had competitions, speaking competitions, debate competitions, etc. And I thought, well, that'd be kind of interesting. Let's try that out. So the result was a competition with the Lions Club public speaking. Had the 3 or 4 minute speech made out of it, and I won. And it was the first speech that had been printed verbatim in the local newspaper. So it was kind of a big deal. And then I went and joined a Rotary competition with the same speech the spring afterwards, and I won that. And that resulted in a week-long event in Ottawa with not an exchange event, but about 270 other kids from across the country had gone down with the Rotarians, and were with the Rotarians in Ottawa. So we toured embassies, the Parliament, House of Commons, the Senate, and the Supreme Court of Canada as well. So it was a really, really great experience. And over the years, I've forgotten about the piece, and I've had other things that I have an aunt who just sent me a letter, and then she never sends me anything. So I was very surprised, and I read it, and what she had handed back was this envelope that you see in the photo with the newspaper cutout. And so I thought, well, that's really that's it's nostalgia. So I shared it with Payman and Andre, and they said, okay, this is our show, right? So this will anchor the show. So what I then did was I went to all our Lord and Savior Google and had them converted into text, and then now what you see is the article digitized and on my Substack. So if you go to my Substack at More Salt by Default, you'll be able to find that particular article. So that's the genesis of how we got to this episode today.
Maybe could you actually speak to the content of your speech, your letter?
I wanted to do something different because at that time, everything in the public sphere, the newspapers and CBC, was using a lot of legal language, using a lot of technical language, and a lot about the mother's rights and the right of the father, or the right of the state, or the influence of the church, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Because at that time, that was still very much part of our strata, right? Was the influence of the church, and of course, being in a Catholic community, we all knew what to expect. So what I wanted to do that was different was to focus solely on the development of the child, and to identify that development made the baby unique, and being unique from the mother meant the mother had no right to take the life of the baby. So that was the push of that. And the title, The Slaughter of the Innocents, is actually a direct Catholic reference to Herod slaughtering the babies in Israel that were 2 years and under when he tried to find Jesus, baby Jesus. So that period, that in history, the Catholics record as the slaughter of the innocents. So that was my direct Catholic reference.
Do you, Andre, do you want to add anything? Otherwise, I wanted to bring up a Substack article.
Well, I can just maybe talk about the title, why we chose 18 Days Later. When I read the text of young Tim Knight, first of all, I was very touched because it was very good. And what struck me was this period, 18 days. And that's why I suggested the title, because it's life starts very, very early, and we are not aware of that. And you have many interpretations. Tim will go through those interpretations and we will comment. But I think it is important to mention that the text was very beautiful, very well written for a young man that after that evolved. Like he said, he forgot about it. Of course, when he shared the newspaper article, it was badly digitalized. We had to struggle, but it is not a long text. But I was very touched, so I want to thank him for that.
And it spoke to me. I could read it easily because it was written at like a 10th grade level. So it was right in that sweet spot where I can actually understand it. I'll reserve my comments until later about everything here. But Tim, I'm going to bring up your Substack article, and I'll let you go ahead and tell us what's going on.
So in my speech, I used the phrase 18 days later is when the heart now formed begins to beat. And the idea there is it's not even 3 weeks since conception. The mother has no idea, that she's pregnant. And so even before her own awareness, the baby already has a formed heart. In the research I've done yesterday, this particular document identifies that it's around 22 or 23 days. So clinical in the week 5. The reason why there's a difference is because this research identifies the start time as the time of ovulation, and it actually includes the potential human, so the potentiality of the egg and the potentiality of the sperm, which is an interesting concept because where many pro-lifers are pushing the point of conception, that research actually suggests that the potentiality is included into that definition. So that was very interesting. So you're at the 3-week period from ovulation, successful and successful, zygote, right? Successful implantation, 3 weeks. And you already, now it's not a 4-chambered heart, et cetera, but it is a functional heart, even by clinical definition. And that's where you find today's title, 18 days later. It identifies physically and biologically, you are a unique being, separate from your mother, even before anybody is aware. And I thought that was a very interesting point. This particular bit of research that I used Google Gemini to do, and then I cleaned it up and prepared it for publication, goes week by week after week 10, I believe, and gives you the larger hurdles, right, that identify it. And this particular bit of research also has a very interesting angle, in that it says the mother's body is built to reject foreign material, virus, et cetera, and yet the baby, you could say, hacks the mother's immune system by actually turning the mother's immune system into the baby's favor. And that's very interesting, because how can you do that except by design, right? So I find some of these interesting concepts. So my take is effectively not to deal with the law or rights or religion, but look straight at the biology. And the biology says a baby is a unique, identifiable living being, and being created by humans means it is human. And then I extend on that and I say, and thereby deserving of all human protections and defense.
So it's interesting stuff. And the other thing in your article that I thought was really interesting was something that Andre pointed out, is the DNA of the child, the infant, the baby, is distinct from that of its parents. What my interest in this is more downstream, is not so much the biology, and I'm not undermining what you said, but the effect that all of these policies, these anti-life and ungodly policies, have had on society. So feminism is one, and I want to speak to it. I'm going to get a lot of flack, but it's just made women miserable. It's completely upset any balance there was in society. Another one is this abortion thing, where you're killing babies and then it's necessitating the mass immigration to make up for the labor shortage. And it ties into maid as well. Like a lot of the girls that I talk to, that live in the urban centers, when I speak to them about the issues of maid, they somehow tie it back to my body, my choice. Like they say, because this might be used as a stepping stone to take away my right to abortion, I can't oppose it. And there's something wrong with the way of thinking. Andre, before we go to you, if everybody could like, share, subscribe, share the space, it would help us get our reach out. And if you have any questions, put it in the comments. We'll get to it. Go ahead, Andre.
Well, I will have question for our audience, and especially toward what Tim just said. The heart is beating after 18, 22 days. And I would like to hear some of our viewers, mother who gave birth to babies, because a man, we cannot, technically, we cannot. Were they aware? Let's say a woman, she's trying to be pregnant with her husband or her boyfriend, and they're trying. Do they feel the heart? When we are very, very calm at night, do you feel the heart beating? I suppose not, but I cannot. Maybe you have some people who will say, yes, when I was pregnant, after 2 weeks, even if I didn't know, I felt something that was different in me. So that's a question I have for women. And toward what Tim was mentioning, yes, the focus is based on biology, but all the impacts or the consequences of our choices. We talked about abortion, and you mentioned immigration, the birth replacement, has to be compensated if it is not high enough for a society or a civilization. Maybe we'll touch these topics a little bit later, because it's a very sensitive subject. And I know some women will say, you're a man, you're not concerned. No, I am concerned because it is a philosophical question.
One other thing I'll add, I forgot to mention the family court system. I think that's another thing that's destroyed society. Go ahead, Tim.
Family courts are a mess, and family courts are a mess on purpose, because what they end up doing is this using the common law tree of life approach to lay the boundaries and what they can and cannot do with constitutional process. These are two separate types of justice, and by trying to mash the two together, bastardizes constitutionality. It bastardizes fundamental rights and fundamental responsibilities, because they're treating tree of life almost like torts, right? Like neighborly wrongs. And when they do this, they create precedent that's meant to fix this moment, this time, specific, unique, which tort is good at doing. Constitution is not, because it's grand, it's sweeping, it's everybody, right? And then you have common law, which is breaks things into identities, right? This type of crime, this type of activity, et cetera, et cetera. But torts can say, well, yes, you took Isaiah with with a lawn dart but we don't think there was criminal intent, and if you pay for the medical bills, then we will consider that, right? We will consider that sorted out. But then they take that unique moment and they apply it to things like abortion, or they apply it to things like pedophilia, right? Right. They apply it to beating your wife when you're drunk, because that happens, and they get off with it. They apply it and then create precedent. And in an effort, as you've discussed in other shows as well, you end up with a legal system that defends itself from its own mistakes. So the family law system falls under all of this, because family law is a common law, or it should be tree of life in a sense, but also has to have the boundaries of tort law, in that it says this is a unique situation. This is a unique situation. This is a unique situation, rather than trying to apply a constitutionality clause, which is what family law tries to do. And inevitably, some mother is stripped of her children, when the truth is, if she had, social supports and some, right, and that she would be more successful. Or a father has been barred from seeing his children because the mother, and I won't say the mother's lawyer saw fit to bring in somebody who lied under oath because the lawyer wanted to win. And I've seen that with my own eyes, right? So the family law system has created this extraordinary breach of trust for both mothers and fathers, divorcees, et cetera, right? Not just child, welfare cases, or who's paying alimony, et cetera. The entire system is broken in that sense. And my ultimate take on this is, except you keep your own house in order, you will fall to the rules of someone else's house. And in our case, we have fallen to the rules of the House of Commons, and they own the legal system. They own the Constitution, because we've seen them do with it what they wanted to do with it. They own the provinces, because they use tax points to control it, et cetera, et cetera. So ultimately, the individual is responsible for their own success or failure. And going forward, that will be my take. There's no blaming anybody else. Well, one of the things we'll do today is we'll point that feminism is not female, right? Because I attack feminism does not mean I am attacking women. And we need to make sure that the public understands that.
I'm gonna pick up on what you said, and I'm gonna say it in a less articulate way, where you said, you basically get your house in order, or somebody else will, like the House of Commons. The institution of the family, you have a man that goes to a woman and says, I will protect you, I will defend you from external threats, and the woman becomes dependent on the man. And then the woman turns around and says, I will bear you children, and I will raise your children, I'll help you raise your children. but the bearing of the children part, the man becomes dependent on the woman, and then you get the family unit, right? I call that a decentralized form of government. I can't think of any other, unless you're one guy in the forest. The state hates that because the state wants centralized form of governance, and they wanted to split that up. So let's put feminism aside now. The family court system, the government goes to the woman and says, listen, I will give you these opportunities, and then they will call it a right. Like, the no fault divorce is one. The high likelihood that you're going to win in family court, and the ability to take the kids and to take 50% of the man's money. And they've now destabilized this family unit. Now, if you think that's sexist, they could have just as easily done it with the man. For whatever reason, they didn't. I mean, they could have screwed over the woman and given the kids to the man. You get to keep the money. We'll make sure, like, wink, wink, you win in family court. But as soon as you do that, you introduce that and you break up the family unit, the woman is now dependent on the state. So I don't even see this as a gender issue. I see this as like a ungodly, demonic, ideological issue. Go ahead, Tim, and then Andre.
It's interesting that you mention it that way. And some of the stuff that I've been reading, not necessarily on the right side, but just analyzing what happened. Our governments convinced our mothers to send our sons to die in wars. And then our governments convinced those mothers to send their daughters into the workforce to make up the difference. So if I want to be spiritual, there's a karma effect in that if you do not see fit to make rational decisions regarding the welfare of your own children, then karma will see fit that neither do they. And it will happen in ways that they maybe do not consciously understand. So that could be a fundamental form of generational guilt that's not even understood. We continue to devalue life from the mother's perspective. And the mother, look at Shiva as example, right? Or even in Eastern religions, where they say the mother is of two aspects. One is the life giver, and the other is the destroyer. And we have put mothers increasingly into the destroyer position, which is not her favored aspect. She's capable, but it's not her favored aspect. It's not what she's initially designed for. And we take away the young men, we put the young women to work, and we give them this is, you can do, and if you repeat a lie often and loud enough, eventually people will believe it. I'm not saying that women should be, naked, barefoot, and in the kitchen. I'm suggesting that they should do things that make their heart full, right? And if you're doing something where, like, this is a photo of a middle-aged woman bragging about 20 some odd abortions. I'm like, so you're effectively a serial killer and you're bragging about it. And there's a psychological effect that happens over time. And we know that this can happen to one person where they become desensitized to trauma over time. Oftentimes the trauma is an external force, obviously, and then later you internalize it, and then you push that back out into the public sphere of your family or other forms of dysphoria. I think that the increase in abortion, the increase in MAID, the white liberal woman problem with opening doors to immigrants who do not respect the traditions of our culture and our laws, and will have provably inadvertently taken advantage of physically, financially, socially, sexually, many of the same women who would have gone to bat for them prior to coming over. Look at the events in Germany. I can't remember what that's called, right? But so we know that these things happen. These things happen, I think, not because of women, but because feminism, a religion, and it's an ism, so it's a religion. Feminism has foisted upon 3 generations of women that they need to be this way in order to get respect. And so this is the effect. As a result, the men have become more and more emasculated, right? So the men become more emasculated because the other half of the lie is Men, you need to be less like your grandfather. Your grandfather was an ogre, right? Your daddy was a drunk. He went out for cigarettes and beer 3 years ago and hasn't come back. And so we raise young men in this community with this expectation. Of course, they're going to escape. Of course, they're going to. I'm not saying that excuses their responsibility, because it does not. Because it is in man also two aspects, right? Of the benefactor, the provider, the protector, and then the other aspect of man, which is what we've seen in our own government, right? And that's the dictator, the heavy hand, right? The totalitarian, right? So we see that as well. And unfortunately, where men need to find the balance and use that on a situational basis, we find men thinking that in order to be the benefactor, I have to sacrifice my maleness, because my maleness is toxic, don't you know? And so we allow, and then we allow ourselves to emasculate.
Let's go to Andre. But first, if you guys could share the stream, we'd appreciate it. Go ahead.
Well, I will go back to maybe a more historic perspective toward legalization of abortion. Let's not, if you bring the first small text, the Earl of Bedford, so I can just read a little bit. When we were preparing the show and when Tim sent us the article that I really liked, I started to go back in time to tell myself, okay, what happened in Canada? And I found this small phrase, the Earl of Bedford case, is a fundamental English common law case that established the legal principle that the fetus is a legal person from the moment of conception for certain property law purpose. It's quite interesting because if you continue to read property law and inheritance, an infant in ventre de sa mère, law French for in its mother's womb or unborn child, is considered a legal person when it is for its benefit, such as inheriting property or receiving a legacy. The right to inherit or sue for injuries only crystallize if the child is subsequently born alive and viable. Why I mentioned this, I discovered that, and I was telling myself, there's something fishy about the Canadian law or the absence of law toward abortion. And we can go back to 1967, 1969 with Dr. Henry Morgan Tyler. But I will not go that far. In 1989, there was a case in Quebec between Chantal Daigle and Jean-Guy Tremblay. They were both acquaintances. They were a couple. They were not married. They were lovers, and they had their intercourse. And the woman became pregnant, but they separate after that. And Jean-Guy Tremblay, she wanted to have an abortion. She wanted to have an abortion, and at the time it was illegal. And Jean-Guy Tremblay brought her to court so she could not have an abortion. He won in the Court of Quebec. Then he won in the Appeal Court of Quebec. And they had to bring back the Supreme Court in summer in emergency because they wanted to state it on the case. And by the time the Supreme Court came back to try to give a judgment, she already had an abortion. And after that, the Supreme Court ruled for her, saying that the common law will precedes the Civil Code of Quebec. So they wanted to make a political statement saying that if it is Canada, the Civil Code of Quebec does not apply. And that was quite interesting at the time because I was young, so I did not pay attention to it. But when I said, okay, let's dig a little bit. I went back and, toward biology, Tim mentioned all those facts, biological facts that are important. You mentioned, Payment, the ideology of feminism and male or transgenderism, or the destruction of the natural family. The history in Canada is quite recent, 1989, and we can go back to Henry Morgan Tyler. I will end on that. I think there's a lot of misconception about biology, history, human right also. I think Tim mentioned also the concept of feminism, which is not femininity. And I will just bring back one thing that happened in 1922 in Moscow during the Soviet Union era. They legalized abortion in 1922, and they had to make it illegal in 1925 because the number of abortion were raising exponentially. Why I say this? Tim mentioned something. You behave in a way, and then you rationalize it, and then you try to apply it to everybody else. The judgment for that is I have behavior, and I have to apply. The society has to comply to my behavior. This is where I disagree. We need common ground on how do we define life? How do we preserve life? How do we preserve demography for a society or a civilization? And yes, because we have a lot of abortion since 1973, only in United States it is 50 to 60 million. So 1 million per year. Of course, you will need to replace those potential citizens by immigration. I will end there because there's a lot of things that we can discuss about. My concern is we pretend that we defend citizen, and you mentioned it, payment. The government's supposed to defend citizen, but they are proposing tools or instruments to undermine their real sovereignty and their real right. It has nothing to do with the freedom of women. On the contrary, when we bring women to the labor force, they are forced to choose. They're forced to choose: do they want to have children or do they want to have a career? And most of the time, they are coerced. I hope the word is right, into one mold or one model, because else they will not be respected, like Tim mentioned.
I kind of agree with you on the last point, but I wanted to talk about you and I, Andre, later on. We're also doing another podcast after this with Dale Richardson on the same topic. I was talking to Dale yesterday, and we were talking about the issues with feminism and what it is, what it isn't, how it's corrupting people's minds. And I told him this is academic, Dale. When you go out there and I asked him, I'm like, have you ever had this conversation with feminists? And he goes, yeah, they usually just lose their mind. They start shouting at me. We have corrupted people's minds, and it's not just feminism. On the campaign trail, I talked to the older generation, 80 to 95. They spent their entire youth fighting or promoting or supporting healthcare. Now, there's nothing. I'm not saying the healthcare is wrong, but what they did was, the way they did it was wrong, by taking out a loan, making eventually their children and grandchildren pick up the tab for that. So they fought their entire life for this system that was not sustainable, and now they feel like it's a right. And when I say a right, like we use the word right for property rights, free speech rights, mobility rights. And if you go to them and you go, listen, the system is just not sustainable. It costs too much money. We can't sustain it. They say, I don't care. It's our right. You're taking away my right to healthcare. It's the same thing with women. Feminism, young women specifically in the cities, feminism has corrupted their minds, as you pointed out, Andre, where they have this mentality that if they, let's be honest, like if you're a stay-at-home mom, you're basically a traitor. You're committing treason. You're a cave woman. So they've brainwashed them, and you can't have that conversation. It has spillover effects into things like MAID, and that's where my interests lie. We can't fix this country if we have people that have been brainwashed.
Feminism is a trauma bonding tool. It is Stockholm Syndrome. To think about it for a second. Feminism is a trauma bonding movement. You're a stay-at-home mom, you're a horrible woman. Right? You're a career mom, you can't have children. Right? So they're literally creating and eventually you either love the ism or you isn't part of it. Right? So feminism is Stockholm Syndrome in action. It just dawned on me. It is. And I have another question too, and that is, I wonder how many of these women who've had abortions have committed suicide afterwards.
Well, I could maybe answer to that because the idea of an abortion is a medical practice, huh? And it is not without consequences, biological consequences or consequences on health, the health of the people. Not only the physiological health, the psychological health, because you arrive at a point. Let's say you're a young woman, 18 or 19 years old, you become pregnant, but you want to go to university, you have an abortion because it's legal, and you meet a young man 5 6 years after you start to have a family, but you don't tell him that you had an abortion. I had the experience with some young women that I met. They were always a little bit more shaky psychologically, not always I would say they didn't have a big self-esteem. Why I met them? Because I think at the time I did not have a good self-esteem. Uh, I think it has an effect, but most of them would not admit it. They would not speak about it freely, not because they're ashamed or they feel guilty. They don't feel comfortable speaking about it. And this is something that I've noticed. We were talking about the legalization in the United States in 1973, with the consequences of 16 million abortion in 52 years, 50 million, let's say the low number. And I took this extract of text on the internet, and I called it 18 days later because it was the text of Tim. But I wanted to point out that the legalization of abortion in 1973 didn't make the abortion legal, but there were abortion before. There were abortion before, maybe not up to the level that we saw from 1973 until 2022 when the judgment was overruled. But people, they were still going to have an abortion, and the pressure, I would say, the religious pressure, the social pressure would forbid them to have an abortion. But in 1973, it flipped. After that, it was common, and you could not question the motivation. Sometimes it was the family, sometimes it was the boyfriend or the peers that they were putting pressure. Let's say you're a teenager, you're in high school, and you're pregnant. After that, you cannot show yourself because you will be judged by the group. And I think there's a psychological effect that we do not analyze enough. That's one. My concern is toward those individuals who, after that, will live with this event. I will not judge the event, but will live with this event for the rest of their life. There are consequences. Tim mentioned something important: the unknown consequences. May I could call it even the karma. How do we talk about an abortion to our children if women had an abortion? I think we undermine those fundamental and philosophical questions for ideological purpose. The government in 1989, the Supreme Court ruled for this woman Chantal Daigle because they needed to create a precedent so they could be able to undermine the authority of the family. And we see how it unfold after. Now we see it in primary school with the gender ideology. We see it with how I can refer to Bill C4, conversion therapy. Those are consequences of the judgment that arrived in 1989, I think. And since then, there's no debate in Canada. Everybody talks about it a little bit, but not much because it's very sensitive. Nobody wants to take a position. We're taking a big risk today, the three of us, because we want to open the debate. We want to discuss and bring some fact. What Tim did in his article when he was a young man, it is incredible because he placed the bar very high. He said, those are facts. Those are biological facts. Now we can talk about it philosophically, spiritually, on basis on religion, basis on rights, but we have to talk about it.
First of all, if I could press upon everyone to share the space, the stream, we'd appreciate that. I wanted to more and more. I get the feeling it's not about abortion. It has nothing to do with that. The example I gave earlier about healthcare, it wasn't the healthcare. It was the brainwashing of people into believing that X is a right, and it's the same thing with abortion. So let me give you a couple of stories very quickly from my life. I had a friend. He found out when he was, I don't know, 15, that his mother had had an abortion. When, and he got crushed. He's like, he didn't talk to his mother for weeks. He goes, I could have had a brother or sister. Now, I'm not judging the mom or whatever. I'm not saying anybody should have gone to jail, but I'm just saying he's a 15-year-old and he understands the value of a life. Another family, a friend, it wasn't an abortion, but it was a miscarriage. And they speak fondly of that. They say, oh, we could have had like another brother or sister. During COVID, actually the last couple of years or last year, my dog, she was pregnant, and I wanted to go on vacation, so I took her into the vet. I was hoping I could sneak her in so she could get her mandatory vaccine so I could board her. And the vet said, we can't do this because there's a risk of miscarriage. She might get a fever and the puppies. So contrast that with vaccines for pregnant women. They're like, the CDC has issued that these are safe and effective. So it's that they're brainwashing. I'm taking it back to women now, young women, that they have made it so that they don't value life. Like that's the issue here. It's not that abortion is legal or illegal. It's that somehow throughout this process, they've taken away the value of life. Go ahead.
And this applies to the men too. And I know it's not as simple as saying, guys, keep your zipper up, but it comes back to personal responsibility. If you are not prepared to start a family, then take appropriate measures that don't include having to kill your own child. And so and to use more sarcastic, angry language, if you're prepared to kill your own children to maintain your own bougie lifestyle, at least be honest enough to admit it, right? Rather than hide behind my right, my choice, because the truth of the matter is you're killing a child. And it could even be legally argued, even genetically, this is not your property. This is a unique individual separate from you. And that we even have to have that conversation is the fallout of let's go back to suffrage, late 1800s, right? Go back to women becoming actively involved in the political scene and men having to step back out of these traditional patriarchal structures. And I'm not saying that they were all good, but when Marxism takes these imbalances that are in patriarchal structures and amplifies them by pushing and saying, women, you need to be more vocal, you need to speak up, you need to this, you need to that, you need to that. And then the women accept this additional pressure. They accept, say, oh, this is the way forward, this is how we do this. Then before you know it, you're sending your sons to die in 2 world wars. You're sending your daughters to work to make ammunition that is going to be used to kill someone else's sons, etc., ignoring all the bankers and garbage at the top. What's happening on the street? What's happening in your home, where you are being used and manipulated emotionally, physically, financially, spiritually, religious-wise, everything is you are being manipulated. It's all tools against you to put you at odds with the men in your community, and to put the men in your community at odds with the women in their community. So now here we are today, increasingly low birth rates. Yes, inflation is responsible for that. Also, we're not having children because we want to be able to go on holiday without having to tow around a 6-year-old. And that's the truth. That's the truth, right? Or we have particular hobbies that are more expensive than having a child. And that's the truth. And I'm not saying that you can't have those toys. I'm not saying that. those who want to produce a family should be supported to produce family, to have family. Produce is even the wrong word, right? That's horrible. What a capitalist word. To have a family, to raise a family, should be
Fabricate.
given the fabricate. There's another capitalist word. As a marketer, so we have a system in let's just pick on Canada that does not adequately support families who want to raise children in an increasingly economically difficult period. And they say, oh, what about child benefit? What about it? Really, you think throwing money at the problem is the solution? Because that's not the solution, right? So now we have made, because if we're not going to treat life with due respect at the bottom when it enters into our universe, why should we treat it when it's near on the way out of our universe? And so now we have bookends, right? So all those pro-lifers out there are now realizing, wait a minute, I have to expand my right to life definition, not only from conception, but to grave. And that grave has to be a voluntary scenario, right? And so how do we manage that? How to manage this new field? You look at the losses, the I'm not for economical, like the physical loss of people. We're down to 1.33 children per woman in Canada. You need 2 or 2.2, I think it is. Remember when in the 80s we said 2.4 children in a two-car garage, right? So you need upwards of double our current just to sustain. That's just to sustain. That's not for growth and development. Meanwhile, the other nations that we're bringing in, and I don't refer to immigrants, I'm referring to the nations that we are bringing in, have very different worldviews than we do. Most of them are very traditional, very family centric. They're also very capable of taking advantage of a weak feminized culture that we presented. This whole liberalness, opening our arms to people who know how to take advantage of these situations, because that's what they had to do where they came from. They simply brought it over here. All of this, that I haven't even touched transgenderism. Transgenderism is a child of feminism. And what did the transgender do while it was still in the womb of feminism? Start cannibalizing from within. So now all of a sudden, so transgender says, "Oh, I should be allowed to go to women's bathrooms," and the women are like, uh, wait, we just finished kicking men out of the bathrooms. Now we have to let them back in. What is this?" So this, I'm not going to say it's all Marxism, because the truth of the matter is, the if you want to look at the bottom of it, the bottom is pride. At the bottom of it is individual pride. We have offloaded our responsibility onto external agents, and then we went, I'm done. I'm taken care of. I've invested. I've got everything I need. But then we gave it to people who are misusing it to their own benefit, because we haven't been watching what they do. So and feminism is a very useful tool, probably one of the more fundamental tools for Western government, because it's been around for so long. And it's very easy for Marxists to use it, because Marxism is very much an emotional pitch.
Andre, why don't we go to you? Everyone, if you could please share the space stream, I'd appreciate it. And Andre, go ahead, and then we'll start going to the questions.
Tim is right. Weaponizing minorities. I was suspicious of abortion. I can talk about two short anecdote. I had a friend, a Lebanese friend. He's Christian Lebanese. He lives in Quebec. He has 4 children. And when he was 27, he got married, and he immediately his wife became pregnant. The next year, he had another child. And many people, just before he got married, says, "Well, you don't have a car, you don't have a house." And he said, "I will take care of this after." This man lived in Lebanon until he was 12 years old. Then he moved to France, and his mother was a midwife in Lebanon. And his mother gave birth to maybe 10,000 babies. And he was helping his mother. And for him, family was the center of the universe. And he said, "We'll have baby and we'll manage after." That's the first anecdote. And now he has 4 children. My own daughter, she was 27 years old. And she was with her boyfriend. She was happy. But one night, she came and we were talking, and she says, "Oh, we have to save the planet. Maybe we will adopt a child." And I said, "What is it this about saving the planet? You don't want to have children? Okay, that's your choice." When she became pregnant, she was surprised. It was not the plan, but she became pregnant. She had pregnancy. She gave birth to my granddaughter, Opal. And after that, she changed completely. She changed completely. Her behavior changed. She started to, she was not self-centered, but she was, she traveled a lot, and she started to change and the mentality. So she became a mother when she was more old, but she started to understand what I was talking about. Tim mentioned something, weaponizing. I can refer to why I say I was suspicious, and then suddenly I start to understand what was happening. Is because I read the book of Michael Jones, Libido Dominandi, Sexual Liberation and Political Control. When you play on the emotion of people and you weaponize them, they lose control of their own life, and then you can control them from outside. I would advise people to read this book because Michael Jones goes through the history of sexual liberation since 1789 with the French Revolution. How people they rationalize a behavior, whatever behavior you will rationalize. I can refer to maybe religion, Christianity, and Islam. Do you see a lot of Muslim women having an abortion? I would be surprised. Nobody talks about this. I would be surprised to have statistics to see if which women are having an abortion, because you see a lot of traditional family. Tim mentioned it. They have families. They have let's say 3-4 children, and they're very happy about it. The birth replacement is 2.3, like Tim mentioned. In Quebec, it is 1.2 now. In 2024, not only we're not making children anymore, but we are proud of it. And then we are angry because we say we will be replaced, our civilization will disappear. Well, we're responsible for this. We are not. I'm not advocating for people to change their behavior in one day. Think about it. Think about what we're talking about today, because it is something that most people don't want to talk about. They just avoid the problem, and then one day they arrive and they face a fact. This is what is happening. Like Tim mentioned, we reduce the amount of population at the bottom, and we reduce it at the end, and in the center with sexual gender ideology, we reduce it too. So I say to people, just think about it, and do not jump to conclusion too fast, because it is also a philosophical problem.
So I propose we go to the questions because we have a lot of questions. So Tim, I'll let you quickly respond.
I was thinking, while we're adding all of these modes of depopulation, let's throw in the opioid crisis too. Right? You mentioned people in the middle. I'm like, oh, what's in the middle? What are adults doing? Drugs.
Okay, we'll keep that in mind when you use a good point. Good observation. So I'm going to go through the questions. I haven't really curated them. I hope none of them are inappropriate, but I'm sure we'll get some people that are angry at us. So let's go with JT. Our society's largest problems are simply due to not getting to the root of a multitude of issues, i.e. abortion, so as to not offend, maintain political prowess. I think that's very similar to what I said. Like, it's not, the issues are never the issues. It's not abortion. It's not healthcare. Like, it's not even MAID. It's what they are forcing us to adopt, what worldview to adopt by agreeing with this, submitting to this, or supporting this. Tim, what do you think?
It speaks to exactly the way we try to end our shows. Hug your children, right? You reinforce your family, strengthen your family. The root of the issues is in the family. The target of societal destruction right now is to destroy the family. Why do we say that the children are a ward of the state? I've been hearing that word since I was a child 50 years ago. This is not new. This is not, look at the orphanages in England. Go back to Charles Dickens and even earlier, right? Where we offload our responsibilities onto an external agent or agencies. So the solution is, the root of the multitude of issues is, raise a child up in the way that they should go, and when they are old, they will not depart from it. Right? And and I don't care what your faith or your worldview, etc., is. If you raise a child in a stable environment where they learn about the value of support and helping each other, they become interconnected, not independent all the time, right? Interdependent, then we will avoid a lot of these problems, which a lot of them have to do with identity. Who am I? Where am I from? What am I capable of? What contribution can I give? These things interest me. Do they interest anybody else? Et cetera, et cetera. We have stripped them of this with this Dr. Benjamin Spock nonsense that a child is born as a blank slate and we can fill it with whatever we want. We know that's not true, but that doesn't stop the government from applying it. So we walk away from all of that external stuff. Support your own family. And anybody who impinges on your family, you ward off with all due haste and strength.
Andre?
Well, the subject, like I said, is very sensitive and heavy. I will just make a small joke in a sense that, in Soviet Union in 1935, babies were produced in the or fabricated in the factory of the Soviet Union, and they were the property of the Communist Party. In Quebec last year, they voted a law, Bill 15, the rights of a child. And in this law, they said that the right of the child is as overruled the right of the parents. This is quite important because it means that the government can say, in the name of the right of the child, we will deprive the parents of their children and we will take them and we will put them in foster home. This is quite, and practically nobody opposed in Quebec when they voted this law. That's the first thing. The second thing, when we think about weaponizing, JT mentioned something very important. We do not not to getting to the root of a multitude of issue because we want to be politically correct. Those are philosophical questions, and that's why I advise people to think by themselves, ask themselves exactly what themselves. Who am I? What do I want to achieve in this life? What I want to have? Do I want children? Is it a possession? Tim proved that it is not my children. My wife or my girlfriend, she gives born to a child, and we love this child. We raise him, and one day he becomes an adult, independent adult. He mentioned that it is starting even at the conception. So it is quite important. People, either they're not well equipped philosophically to debate about this or to discuss about it, so they avoid the problem.
John O'Flynn has a question. Sorry, Andre, he wants to know the name of the book, the Michael Jones that you mentioned.
Yes, it's a very good book. It's a long book. It is, it's oriented. The name is Libido Dominandi, Sexual Liberation and Political Control. So it shows that when you don't control yourself, somebody will control you.
It's good to see Mr. O'Flynn is back. Sundown 95, thank you for reposting the stream. JT as well. Gary Haliki, thank you for reposting the stream. Let's see what Shareware Canada has to say. Birth rates drastically tanking worldwide. See how they are prepping behind the scenes. Why mainstream news won't talk about it. Yet Odessa live excellent birth rate documentary. Oh yeah, Odessa Orlowitz. I'm trying to get an interview with her. She's doing some good stuff. Yeah, I mean, birth rates are plummeting. I'll tie it back to my unique perspective because I was an immigrant here. I came as a kid. Everything I noticed about life and growing up, families in Canada, the harmony wasn't there. Like I'm seeing women just hounding their husbands in a way that in an Iranian family you would never do that, intentionally piss off your husband. I'm noticing husbands that like just recklessly cheating on their wives and there's no consequence. And I'm seeing kids in this single parent household, like the harmony between men and women, it's not there anymore. Tim.
There is in Hebrew, the word for man and woman contain in them the words for God and fire, and the bonding that when they're broken is just fire. So the image is that a man and a woman who are not in union are consumed by the fires of their own persons, right? That when they are in union, they are doubly, like, doubly aflame, so to speak. So ancient cultures have embedded in their own language. It's not just Hebrew. Many other cultures have done exactly the same thing, where their language and their stories and the words themselves, the images themselves, reinforce the importance of recognizing. Now I'm going to compare man and woman to a peanut, that we are dicotyledons, right? We are two halves of the same seed, right? A dicotyledonous seed is two halves, the same seed, and with the germ at the root, right? With the germ between them. Man and woman are equal halves of the same species. But even a seed that is two pieces is not visually the same as its partner. They're just not, because that's not the way it's designed. Men and women, ignoring the physical stuff, ignoring the way we think differently, because men tend to be compartmental, women tend to be much more of a, like a 3D spider web. So, and these things are true, but we are also capable of, right? So the man is capable of feminine aspects. The female is capable of masculine aspects. We know this because look at what's happening in our culture, right? The emasculated male is a male who is spending more time in his feminine aspect, so to speak. And then the masculine female is spending more time in the masculine aspect of her character. That creates friction between man and woman. It creates friction because it's saying anything he can do, I can do better. Anything, right, I can do better than him. And when you're a child, a little girl or a little boy, and you're finding out and you're figuring out, all of this is your mind and your soul figuring out its place in your society. But if you're still behaving like that after your teens, after the formative years, into your adult years, then you're going to be doing what you see happening in universities. You're going to be out there spray painting statues and other, ridiculous things, because you're still acting, you're still behaving like you're still trying to find your way. Only someone's taking that James Dean teenage angst and weaponized you. And that's smarter minds than us are able to, over time, over years, over decades, manipulate entire cultures. Look at the series that was on TV some years ago called Mad Men, right? That was Edward Bernays, right? Who was the psychologist who brought psychology to marketing, right? And then when that became useful, governments and other think tanks, etc., began to go, oh, we can use this too for ourselves, and already using what had been successfully applied, right, in Russia and later on in China, and begin applying it to the American model or the Western model. We abdicated our responsibility to make up our own mind and to live by our own consequences. And when we do that, we also give up who we are, right? So it's not that, in my mind, feminism is not about women. It's Marxist. Feminism is a Marxist tool. It's actually trauma bonding when a woman cannot choose to stay at home and raise her children, the next generation, because so many of her peers have fallen into the pit of thinking that she's a traitor to women, right? What is that? That has to stop, right? And so we're not anti-women, we're not pro-men, we're pro-family, right? And to be pro-family means you actually have to be pro-family. You have to put your money where your mouth is.
Andre?
Well, Tim mentioned something about Marxism, and I go back to Soviet Union, 1925, when they legalized the divorce and they were legalizing abortion. Men were divorcing massively, and there was a comment about a single mother raising their child or their children. That's a fact. Sometimes we saw women arriving in the labor force. They started to work, but they were in competition with men. And when they are in competition with men, you have more people on the market, labor market. So you pushes wages down, and what happened? The consequences: people, they have less money. They say, okay, why would I have children? It's more complicated. This Marxism has this tendency, and I think we talked about permanent revolution. They want us to be uncertain. The family is supposed to be something stable, something you nurture, something you build slowly. Takes time. Raising a child takes time. One day he becomes a teenager. We know we were all teenagers. It's always a very complex period in our life, conflictual. So I think it is very important to understand the necessity of stability. Yes, we can rock and roll, but not 24 hours a day. We need to rest. We need to be able to think about what will be the next step.
I'm just going to. I'll also.
You
I'm
can, you,
imagining this is the
yes,
big. This is for
that's the
Mr.
book of
O'Flynn.
Michael Jones.
There you go, Mr. O'Flynn. Put that down. So shareware, thank you for sharing the stream. Shareware's got another point. 80% of women want to have babies. It is just never the right time, is what the socioeconomic data shows. Then they find she waited too long. Yeah, I'm kind of like that. I focused too much on my career, and now I'm living out in the woods with 2 dogs. Tim.
There's a comment above, Granddaddy-o, fatherless homes are a root issue. In this generation, that is true. Once upon a time, if a young man made a woman pregnant, there were shotguns that made sure that they got married. And both families, knowing that maybe there might not be, love as the cause of the bond, and more just, the momentary, physical attraction, but having created this life, have immediately entered into a bond with their community. And so the two families support this structure. And as it's not always good, because we're humans and pride gets in the way. But the fatherless home, and there's another line somewhere saying something like 60% of families in Vancouver are single mother homes. There are I'm not saying this is all, and it could be a very small percentage, and I believe it is so, but there are women who are intentionally getting pregnant because they continue to live their own lives and society is paying their bills for them through our social net. So we know that abuses do exist. I'm not saying it's a lot, but I'm saying it exists. We've offloaded men, let's point the finger, have offloaded our familial responsibility, which is actually our right. Let's put it that way, a divine right. Let me put it right to the extreme. It is my divine right to father my family. It is not another man's right to provide supports to my family, like child benefits or medical benefits or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It is my right. And we have for many, many generations, in support of our social democracy, which is still socialism, it's just soft. We have offloaded my responsibility as a father onto external agents and external forces. So why should it be a surprise? Why should it be a surprise that my son behaves the way he does? And I'm not saying he does, this is a hypothetical, right? Is when our sons are out having trysts and dalliances and making babies and then walking away because there's no consequence. So we have a society permits you to behave in this manner, literally causing these issues, and we permit that. So the men have a high degree of responsibility for the situations that exist. So the young mother with 3 children by 2 different men, who's right, it's and instead of living on welfare and whatnot, all of this can be avoided, and it can be avoided by a healthy family at the beginning. Because when a young woman and a girl child and a boy child see a healthy relationship between the adult, the mother and father, and yes, that takes time, but when they see that, they emulate that. Why is there so much noise and going through the school systems to wrestle away the children's minds from that of traditional family values? Because they know that the parents aren't doing it. So it's easier to do it at an education level, even if it's low granularity, meaning it's kind of coarse and kind of obvious. They don't care. They're getting away with it because they're not guarding the gate anymore. And so the only way to prevent it from happening in the future is to start guarding the gate.
Andre.
Well, Shareware is right. It's a natural process for a woman. Even if a young woman decide to have a career, she goes to university, becomes an engineer, doctor, whatever she wants. One day she will feel the biological time, 35, 40 years old, 45 years old. There's a lot of women. I don't say they regret. I just say they know that they chose something different. But why do you coerce women into always going into a career? Like you said, Tim, Payment earlier, we depreciate women who stay at home, who would take care of the children, like they will not have an education. Today we have a lot of ways to have a good education. It's not like 100 years ago. So I think Shareware is right. There's a lot of women who are waiting because of the social pressure, and after that, they I don't say they regret, but they, like Payman mentioned earlier, they are nostalgic.
I am so the next one I'm going to go to is JT. I'm just going in order. I think it's only fair if somebody was watching from the beginning, their question gets addressed first. I know of women that were coerced when young to proceed with an abortion by their parents or teachers who regret it, but they often won't admit this publicly because society has taught them not to. I've never heard of that, but my sense of being a Canadian, it's got its limits. I came here when I was 6, and this stuff is all foreign to me. So, Tim, what do you remember?
Oh, I think JT's correct because I've seen it. It's we, yeah. It's because it's funny how, in spite of people out in marketing land wearing T-shirts saying I've had 14 abortions and bragging about it, that person is probably one of 150 million people who would say such a thing, right? The vast majority of people who have been coerced into an abortion, they bear that and I think that's an extraordinary shame, and also that's a personal shame, because they were coerced, right? So there's so much for bodily autonomy, right? But then the feminists will paint it as, well, you're empowered, etc. The the culture forms the politics, right? I don't think it's the other way. The culture forms the politics, and if we have a culture that imposes shame based on socioeconomic or classist, etc., what will the neighbors think type of relationships, then the fundamental problem goes back down to, like, it doesn't matter what question you ask me, fix your family, right? So if you have parents or teachers who are coercing a young woman or a young man to have an abortion, or to trans, or to maid, or to, it's all right, any of this, then the solution to that is a father and mother who take direct responsibility for their own children, and tell every other agent and agency outside their front door to fuck off. And we have to be strong about that. And if a family is making that effort, but it has weakness, then the extended family has an obligation, not just opportunity. Well, for opportunity, yes, an obligation to step in and assist with that. This is how you, the way to resist the encroachment is to build against it. That's it. To accept that there will be friction with the world and to build against it. So I think the solution to the rise in abortions, the rise in trans, the rise in MAID, the rise in overdose and drug use, the rise in divorces, the rise in single mothers, the rise in male suicides, the solution is simple: family. End of story. Family. And if you don't want to accept responsibility for your own family and you have one, that sucks. And I have no solution for you except fix your family. And to fix your family, you have to fix yourself. And that's me pointing at me, because I have plenty of sin behind me. But it remains to be true. And I know that if you work at it, you will find success.
Andre?
Tim is right, and GT is right too. Many women were coerced. And don't forget one thing, toward MAID or toward abortion, they are considered healthcare. They are not. Do no harm for a doctor is that if you coerce somebody, a young woman, 14 years old, to have an abortion, you abuse your authority. You're supposed to be there to support and help physiologically and psychologically. That's why, the Bill C4, when it was voted and it was supported by the conservative, what they call the conversion therapy, was to be able to counsel people, to help them instead of forcing them in I would say, a fast solution that maybe the person will regret a couple of years later or will feel guilt. They will feel guilt. If they don't, they're not connected with their self and the reality. And I think GT is right. There's a lot of women who were coerced, and this is an abuse of power. We see it now with MAID also.
Yeah, good point with the MAID. I don't know what Gary means by this. Tim, no Valentine's Day card for you. I don't know what it was in response.
I think I've been buying my own Valentine's Day cards for like a couple of decades, man.
Well, me and Andre will send you a card this Valentine's.
See, that just makes my heart happy.
Let's see what Granddaddy-O has to say. All cults, like the modern left, have engaged in human, specifically child sacrifice throughout history. That is what the modern left abortion has become. It's ritualistic practice to appease and be accepted by the leftist herd. Yes, and we talked about this, and I'm going to pass it on to Tim and Andre, but I just say it's not just abortion. It's also with MAID. It's also with this fentanyl opioid crisis. It's anti-life. I don't know what other word to use. Tim?
Ancient cultures have their springtime child sacrifice rituals to their springtime gods for a healthy harvest and for success and good life for themselves. That's a fact. We have ancient cultures, not really that ancient, 4,000 or 5,000 years, not really that long ago, who would intentionally start bearing children in fall so that the children would be born in time for the spring sacrifice. Think about that. So what's our equivalent to, because now we've squashed all of our gods, right? We Nietzsche'd all of our gods, which is not what he meant, but let's just play with it. So now we're all nihilistic and we're all self-centered. I am my own God, humanism, blah, 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 blah. I am me, I am independent. It's the me generation. So I have my career, I have my hobbies, I want to travel, I have, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I want, to the point where if you find life telling you, I think you're going to be pregnant this year, that they are more than satisfied to sacrifice that child so that they may maintain their lifestyle. But at least be honest enough to admit that that's what you're doing, rather than hiding it in garbage rhetoric and trying to make everybody else feel like somehow they're impinging on your right. Right. So that's, I mean, I would rather men just grew balls and said, I'm going to fuck what I'm going to fuck, and I'll just walk away from what I don't like if we have an accidental child. Well, like, once upon a time, you would be forced to, or you would be completely abandoned by your society, and we don't do that anymore. We just let them run amok, right? And we must take responsibility. What we are doing between MAID is freeing up hospital beds. MAID is an accounting check mark in a hospital. Oh, we freed up this bed, right? MAID is another empty bed available to be rented to some other poor schmuck who's getting dementia and they have to put him off in a home. Or MAID is for, you know, the athlete who had a devastating injury and now they're quadriplegic and now they're in a deep depression, and the medical system intentionally drops hints and poor service in an effort to convince them to choose medical suicide, you know, to choose government assisted suicide, right? The drug problem, it's been revealed in BC that the provincial government is actively participating in the drug trade. Are you kidding me? Right? So all of this, all of it, divorce rate, et cetera, all of it is a form of sacrificing your future for pleasure today. All of it. It's all child sacrifice.
Go ahead, Andre.
Well, Granddaddy O is right. You know, when he refers to child sacrifice throughout history. Again, I'm reading Robert Graves, The Greek Myth, and when you go back in time, you know, during the ancient Greek, it was you had child sacrifice. Today, I consider abortion like a ritual. One thing that happened, you know, with the judgment with Roe versus Wade in the United States that was ruled in 1973 and overruled in 2022, was that the Jewish United States Council, immediately after the judgment was overruled, said it goes against our value because abortion is a Jewish value. I said, wait, what is happening? So we have to go back to we can talk about religion. What under what law? We had Charles Fichtner many weeks ago. Do we want to be ruled by natural law, protecting life, or do we want to be ruled by the law of man or the law of a religion? We can talk about the Christian religion. We can talk about Judaism. We talk about Islam. Which law we will choose? And I think it is important. I think Granddaddy mentioned it. It's important. Child sacrifice is not an ancient concept. It is a modern. It is an actual concept. I had a podcast last year with a woman. Her name is Maria Poumien. She wrote a book in French. I think it was translated in English. Merchandising Life, about abortion and about child trafficking. This book is devastating with fact. It's only fact. It is in Ukraine, it is in Europe, it is everywhere. And that child sacrifice, we have it. Let's not think that we are that modern and that progressive today.
Let's go to a bit of a lighter comment question from our friend David Gardner. Freedom Conversation podcast. He says, I wonder what Isaac would say. And then he's like, Abraham, although Isaac returned to life. I don't know, real quick, do you want to comment, Tim? And then Andre.
Isaac was never dead. There was no return to life. Isaac was never dead. So, yeah.
Andre.
Well, you know, asking Abraham to sacrifice his children. That was one task God asked, about will you sacrifice? If you comply, you will be welcome in the kingdom of God. God was testing him. Will he comply? And then after, at the last moment, he said, I will not sacrifice you. You will not have to sacrifice your child. Think about abortion. A young woman becomes pregnant. She has to make a choice, and it's a choice that will have an impact on her entire life. And this is why I say, I advise people. I would say some people who counsel those young girl or women, you cannot abuse your power. You have to be supportive of the person. That's why, you see it in UK now. Abortion clinic. You cannot even go and support women because they go to an abortion clinic. You talk to them. Some women, they support those young women, and with a conversation of 15 minutes, they say, okay, we will help you, and they go away from the abortion clinic. So we are not supporting them in a time of vulnerability. We're not supporting them.
You know why the pro-life is losing on the political front?
Donald
They got no
Trump.
fucking money. No, they've got no money. They got no money. So abortion feeds fetal tissue to research. MAID feeds organs to whoever, right? What about overdoses? What happens to those bodies, the parts that are because those are not claimed by the family. Like there are a lot of these deaths that are happening in between, birth and actual, old age death. A lot of these deaths, the body is a closed casket. You have no proof that there's even a body in there. So the death industry, I don't know if I'm making a phrase up or not, but the death industry, the body industry, what we're doing with our organs and our fluids and our cells, etc., that's money. Planned Parenthood, for example, in the States, right, until very recently, the last 5 years or so, before their ego finally caught them on film, right, were millions and tens of millions of money into the pockets of politicians. Why is pro-life losing? You got no fucking money, right? You're living on ideology. You're not actually putting anything into it. You're not competing. You cannot compete. The pro-life cannot compete on a political front because money talks and bullshit walks. And I don't care if I'm sounding rude and crude about the issue, but the fact of the matter is, righteousness. What's that new phrase I learned? Righteousness without power is just an opinion. And so people who want to support a Christian value in the country, who want to support traditional values, who want to protect the right to life, etc., dying with dignity, all these other things, want to protect children so that they're not taken advantage of in our schools, and want to end child trafficking, etc., will continue to happen until you put your frickin' money where your mouth is. Even us here, the best we can do is speak about it. Individually we are all doing different things. We're actually doing something about what we're saying. We're not just right, but on this particular show, all we can do is tell you about these things and share our view in the hopes that we inspire some of you to think about these things, and maybe that in your own way you find ways in which you can actively do something positive. And the reason why I continue to go back to supporting and strengthening your family is because everybody has one. And that's why I continue to go back to that.
So, Gary, thank you for reposting the stream. Clown World, better late than never. I was wondering when you showed up. I don't know if you heard, but we're reading the comments in order. We're trying to be fair to the people that watched from the beginning. So we got Shareware Canada again. What is she writing? I agree, Payman. I have two daughters in their 20s. They absolutely want to have children, but they have more arguments as to why they won't or can't. Tim addressed this a little bit earlier when I said I got involved in my business and I'm in a forest with two dogs. What he's saying is society allows this to happen. This was the old, kick in the butt where it's like you live with your parents and then you get married and you live with your wife. but we don't have that anymore. So you can just go to the bar every single day. Tim?
Yeah, this again goes back to, so if we want to evolve this model of family first, you expand it. Let's say Sue brought this up. We didn't bring it up because it was a long comment, but it's an interesting point. What happens when a spouse dies young and you're left with the family? Well, that's what the extended family's for, right? Because we are told never leave a widow without protection, never leave a child without a father figure or a mother figure, right? So we are told that. So that means your extended family is still family, and they have roles and the capability of providing. So in the situation where, like, I have three daughters, right? And two of them, the younger ones, are saying, "Yeah, I would like to have a family, but the financial thing is ridiculously difficult, and there are really very few men out there who, who know what they're doing, right, and willing to make that commitment." So these things are extent you that becomes an issue of extended family. If I'm and we're doing this ourselves, our own selves. If we're finding that a member of our extended family is in financial trouble, then we don't make loans, we give them money. We give them labor, we arrange for traffic, we arrange for housing, and we because why? Because you're family, and we just deal with it because you're family. If we plan to fight back against a crooked and evil government that's hell bent on getting rid of us off of our own land, feel like I should inject a land acknowledgement, right? And getting rid of us off of our own land, then we fight back by strengthening our family. And we don't make loans to our family, maybe dollar for dollar. No usury in family. That's ridiculous. That's not family, right? It's so the yes, the children growing up today look at everything and they go, "Wow, how's it even possible? It cost me $1,000 to rent a bedroom in someone else's house," and it's true. How do we do this? Well, you all have to get, if you have to be under the same roof to find a way to make it work, then make it work. In the 80s and 90s here in the Valley, we had what we call the monster homes, and these were Indian and Pakistani families that have been in Canada for a long time and finally had put their money together and went, "We're going to build these great big massive 7-bedroom 5,000 square foot 2-story homes on a big hunk of property, and we'll have 3 generations live under the one roof." And lo and behold, they were the wealthiest people in the town. Why? Because they were smart about it. And once upon a time, our European families lived the same way. But since the Second World War, we have sacrificed our interdependence for the me generation. And we have to move back toward family and extended family structures. That's the way out.
Go ahead, Andre.
Well, intergeneration house is very popular in Quebec since many years because people are saying, okay, I will help my children. They will stay with me. They will stay in a separate place. They will have their own little cottage, and you're attached with it, and they can take care of their parents, but parents can also take care of the children. We have daycare today. We're supposed to have everything is supported by the states. But I go back to what Tim just mentioned: the family, the core family. If you have an intergenerational house, you live with one of your children, and you can take care of the children. You can, you you have to support. We have to support each other. This was broken. We were atomized in the atomic era, or the atomic time, 1945, would say 1980. After that, it started to decay, and now we have to go back to maybe a more natural way of living, having a structured family, and people, member of family with each other.
So I want to, maybe we can do one or two more questions. We've already passed the 90-minute mark. But Andre, there's a specific question for you from Clown World. You're pretty popular. Andre, could you please share some examples that we are apparently proud not to have more children?
Well, apparently proud not to have more children. I think people are proud. They're proud of their car. Like I said, when I mentioned my friend, the Lebanese friend, proud of their car. They're proud of their house. It's the to have instead of to be. And I think there's a lot of people who fall for it, and they after a certain time, consumerism is one thing, but it's empty. children. They bring you love. They grow. They're different from you. They challenge you. You stay young with them. I think that's one thing that we have to value more instead of just having goods.
Works for me. Um,
Imagine, if you will, it's the 1960s, and you're the major marketing powers in the West, particularly America, and you realize my marketplace is completely saturated with all of my washing machines and toothpaste and et cetera, and I really have no way to expand to get more investment and to make more. How do I do this? I'm like, I've got 100 million households in America, and I'm full of they're all buying all my stuff, right? They're all. How do I do this? Well, yeah, but each house has 7 people in it. What if I just start marketing to the individuals inside the house? Well, that would work, but how do you sell, 5 tubes of toothpaste? Well, if the children are in college, right? So, and I separate them from their family and I make them independent, and I make them, they buy their own car, right? They buy their own insurance. They pay for their own utility bill. They have their own cell phone. They have their own, right, hobbies. As I separate them from family, then I've effectively doubled my marketplace. And I know as a marketer, I would be interested in that type of thing, simply for the challenge of being able to say, can I do enough Pavlovian nonsense to make children move away from their families so that I actually have a second income? Because now they're getting me a utility bill as well. I'm not just getting one hydro bill. So the people who were in the monster homes here in the Valley back in the 90s had 2 families for 3 generations living in one house, one hydro bill, one internet bill, right? 2 or 3 vehicles that managed everybody's needs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas our Western European mindset moving into the 60s became much more independent. All their movies, all their TV shows, when you go to college, when you move away from home, when you do this, and that's how you get to my generation. Now, grant you, I'm early on Gen X, so there's a considerable number of Gen X are younger than me. But when we grew up in that me generation of the 80s and get into the 90s, by the time we hit 20, we'd already been completely inculcated. Is that the right word? Right? Indoctrinated to believe I have to live on my own. I have to have my own car. I have to have my own, I have to pay for my own hydro. I have to pay for my own this. And in so doing, we satisfy the companies who needed to expand their marketplace. And so we find ourselves in situations like this. The inevitability of an economic crisis is the fallout, and we see that because now families are retracting or contracting. They're contracting, so that young women and men are no longer wanting to have families because they're trying to hang on to what's left of the comfort of the 90s and the zeros. They're trying to hang on to what's left of that, right? So the solution, what's the solution to not having babies? Make babies, right? What's the solution to a broken family? Fix the family. These are fundamental.
Where are we? Shareware Canada says, I saw a stat that said 60% of children are being raised in a single parent home in Vancouver, specifically mothers. This is a major issue. I've talked about this with lots of people that ran for school board trustee. Emily Dugan, that's the girl who told Justin Trudeau to get the fuck out of this province. She ran for school board trustee. When you got a broken home, single parent home, you can't pay attention to your children as much, it ties into the filth in the schools. Tim?
Yeah, this it's all Marxism. So all of this is the fallout, the effect of Marxism. What was that line? The result is intended, right? So even if something happens to a society or a culture, not directly expected, like an expected result of a large scale experiment or a large scale test, even if it gets you to where you want to go. Now we have 60% of children raised in a single parent mother home. Vancouver proper, like the greater area, has about 2 million people in it. So then let's cut that into 4 just to make things simple. And so that's 500,000. So what's 60% of 500,000? So 400,000 youth in Vancouver are being raised by a single mother. It's probably more than that. So that means we have 400,000 in one city. Now, grant you, Vancouver's the fourth largest city in Canada. But imagine those numbers in the States with what, 10, 15 times more cities than we have. Right? So what is the inevitable collapse? Now you're entering, we're in Brave New World, because these children are growing up thinking that relationships are nothing if not painful, so they avoid them on purpose. That means every intimate or emotional relationship is short term. So we're raising a complete generation of children, well, 60% of them, for whom relationships are casual and not deep, and not meant for commitment.
Andre?
Well, 60% meaning that you have the absence, usually it's the mother. So the absence of the father is the absence of authority, and the mother has to compensate for it. She will try to be at the same time the mother and the father, but she cannot occupy all the roles. So that has a psychological impact. And Tim mentioned something very important, the fact that they will not value long-term relationship because it's a lack of responsibility, lack of authority. I think it has an impact, and we psychologists should measure it. They don't.
Well put. I promise we'd do one more question, and let's do that because there's so many questions, which shows there's only 300, there's 400 viewers, but way more questions than usual. So this was an engaging conversation. I'm going to lump two together. The first is from Gary. I just want to mention this in passing. Habitat for Humanity, mid-70s, Vancouver field trip. The world is overpopulated. You shouldn't have kids, but if you do, no more than 2. And he was 10 or 11. That's monstrous. I'll let you guys comment that. But here's the one I wanted to bring up. A fierce lioness says, divorce should be free and a marriage license should cost $50,000 to be put in trust when you retire still married. A whole lot less people would get into disposable marriages. I 100% agree. A fierce lioness for prime minister. Tim, I'll throw it over to you.
A quick joke too to that is there are some clubs, bars, pubs, clubs that you can enter for free. You can drink all you want, but it costs you $1,000 to leave the building. Now these are underground, because how do you enforce that? Well, we know how you break their legs, right? But so there are relationships we get into where to exit the relationship must be punishing. Must be punishing. I joked with somebody once that people should not have to, that the license for getting married should be that they both take handgun training, and the government gives them a gift of a handgun and lifetime ammo
To shoot each other?
Leave them alone. Because we don't understand the seriousness of what we're stepping into, because it's no longer till death do us part. And the thing is, and I'm not suggesting that they shoot each other, but what I'm saying is that they understand, well, what the scriptures say, you hold the power of life and death in your tongue, right? Right? You hold the power of life and death in your tongue. Don't make a vow unless you know you can keep it, right? And scripture says, if better, don't make a vow at all. Just do what you said you do, right? So the government doesn't care if you are married or common law or divorced. They're going to get your money anyway. The only reason we even recognize marriage or recognize common law or recognize divorce is because our culture still has a particular religious connotation attached to this. This is why you bump into the definition of marriage, because the Christian church has a different definition than the state. Obviously, the state's definition is only interested in a tax status, right? So that's all they're interested in. the marriage should be, no, take it away from the state entirely. Take it away from the state entirely. The Back to family, right? What's the solution, right? So your son comes of age where he's spending too much time in the washroom after a sports event, and you have to sit down with him and say, listen, one of these days a girl's going to catch your attention. We're going to have a conversation, and that mothers have the same conversations, mothers and aunties and cousins, with their daughters, and fathers and cousins and uncles and grandpas have their same with their, right? Yes, lawyers are a real problem too. The legal system is entirely bent on getting your money. They'll tell you whatever they will absolutely sycophant. Their lawyers are worse than Google. I'll tell you what you want to hear. Just pay me more, right? Most of them fall under this category. We have to separate family matters from the government entirely. So the way we forced the government to bow, this is like our old gods. How did we kill all of our old gods? We stopped praying to them, because without the power of our prayers, they all died. Right? It's a Victorian attitude, right? Don't look at it; it'll go away. Right? So we have to separate ourselves from the government, to separate ourselves from Marxism. We reattach to the family. We stick with it as much as we can. We have to be open and honest and take our beatings where we deserve them, because we all deserve a certain degree of a beating, right? And to do our best moving forward. The only way to reduce the divorce rate is to raise sons and daughters who say, I'm not going to allow this disagreement or this financial problem or this to break our bond. And they have to actively choose not to. And families need to the extended families need to actively and intentionally support it. They must. The way to avoid the destruction of the nuclear family is to strengthen the nuclear family.
Andre, what are your thoughts and what's this picture?
Well,
You're killing me with these pictures, man.
no, just bring it. I will keep my comment very short. Time the child-free life when living at all means not having children.
I remember this. Yeah.
That's what they were advertising all the time, and they are brainwashing young people because they are not aware of the choice that they will do when they're 20s in the beginning, and when they will arrive at 40, they will say, okay, maybe I have a career. Some of them will be happy, but eventually they will feel emptiness. This is a natural process of life, and the more we age, the more we feel this. Why we have children and grandchildren is because they bring us joy, and I think we have to be able to inspire people. And we always use this word, and I go back to natural law and Charles Fichtner. Following natural law. I think it's important because this is propaganda.
No, well put. For the audience, so apologies if we didn't get into your questions. This time we did it a little bit differently. We went chronologically. So whoever was here first, they got their questions answered preferentially. We only got through half of the questions. I'm very sorry. This is a serious issue. We're not dodging any questions. But I think we had a pretty good show. It was good engagement, and we got a lot across. And I think this is a conversation that needs to be had more often. I will say one final thing. Mr. Maloche and I, we're going to be on a podcast with Dale Richardson later today at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. We're going to be talking more or less about the same thing, but specifically on feminism. So Andre's a philosophical expert. Dale's done a whole bunch of literature review, and I don't know. I'm just going to try to keep up with these guys. But try to join us there. We'll be on X. Is there anything else you two gentlemen would like to add? Maybe next week, what we're going to be talking about?
Well, I can just say that the next week I will have a podcast on the philosophy of information about the monopoly of credit with Dr. Oliver Adorn. It will be Thursday night at 8 Eastern Standard Time, based on the social credit system of C.H. Douglas. So we will have a first interview in English, and week after it will be an interview in French. So if people wants to assist, it's quite interesting, especially now comparing where we are economically. It's a very hard burden, actually.
Tim, do you want to make a plug for your Substack account?
Yeah, I just started Substack. It's at More Salt by default on Substack. We are slowly, I believe, gravitating toward using Substack for Cerberus at the gate. So a rebrand is somewhere in play. We'll be preparing art and moving any articles that we prepare, any research that we end up using, graphs that I build or whatnot, will also be housed at that Substack. So when the time comes, we hope to centralize things and give you more of a what to do and where to go after the on-air, light goes out. So that's what we're planning for the future.
And we said we're going to do a little teaser for next week. Unless something earth-shattering happens in Canada, we were thinking about talking about World War II, how, not enough people went to jail after the Nuremberg trials, and how everything from World War II to now is related. Like we got the wrong people in power. These are ungodly people. Again, unless something dramatic happens in Canada.
Yeah, I just need to draw a fatter teaser than that. Why don't we just say something like explore an alternate history where Hitler was right?
Well, it's already dramatic, so we will be in line with the political agenda.
We'll see. Well, I don't want to incur the wrath of anybody calling me a Holocaust denier, but a big thank you to my co-host, and a thank you to the audience for joining us for another episode of Cerberus. Bye, guys.